service or replace the seals, begin by removing the 8 hex socket head screws on the front of the manifold using a 10mm Allen wrench. Upon removal of the socket head screws, you will notice a small gap is formed between the discharge and inlet manifolds. Remove the discharge manifold and place on a flat surface with the V-packing spacers facing up. To remove the V-packing spacers from the discharge manifold, insert tip of flathead screwdriver into the machine grooves and pry away from the manifold. Use caution not to damage the surface of the manifold where the inlet manifold O-rings seal. Using a pick, remove the O-rings from the lower chamber of the inlet manifold. Before removing the inlet manifold, remove the large coil springs using a pick. To remove the inlet manifold, use a 12mm Allen wrench to remove the 4 hex socket head manifold bolts. To assist in removing the manifold, rotate the crankshaft until there is separation between the manifold and crankcase. Using 2 flathead screwdrivers, pry manifold away from the crankcase. Using a rubber hammer, tap the manifold away from the crankcase. The male adapters may come out during the removal of the manifold. To avoid damage to the plungers, be sure to support the manifold during removal. Place the manifold on a flat surface with the V-packings facing up. To remove the V-packings, reach beneath the packing using a flathead screwdriver and pry away from the manifold. Use caution not to scratch the sealing surface of the manifold during removal. If reusing the packings, inspect the inner and outer surfaces for signs of wear or damage. Next, reach inside the manifold and remove the female adapters. Inspect the inside and outside surfaces for wear or damage. To service the low pressure seals, turn the inlet manifold over. Using a flat tip screwdriver, reach under the lip of the seal and pry away from the manifold. Use caution not to damage the sealing surface of the manifold during removal. If reusing the low pressure seals, inspect the inner and outer surfaces for any wear or damage. To begin installation of the new seals, begin with the low pressure seal. You will notice that one side of the seal has a spring. Install the low pressure seal with the spring side down and press into place. To ensure complete seating of the seal, use a socket that is slightly smaller in diameter and tap into place. To access the high pressure V-packings, turn the inlet manifold over. Inspect the sealing surface of the manifold for any signs of wear or damage. Install the female adapters with the flat surface facing down into the manifold. Before installing the V-packings, apply liquid gasket to the walls of the seal chamber. Install the first V-packing with the groove side facing up. Install a second V-packing, again with the groove side facing up. Before reinstalling the manifold, you will need to replace the plunger retainer O-ring. To service this O-ring, start by removing the 2-piece seal retainer with wick. If you are replacing the wick, you can remove the front retainer, followed by the wick. you will notice a small hole in the seal retainer. This must face down when reassembled. To remove the plunger, begin by using a 21mm hex wrench to loosen the plunger retainer. Before completely removing the plunger assembly, push the plunger towards the drive end to break loose from the retainer. Unscrew and remove the plunger retainer. Inspect the O-ring and backup ring for any cuts, nicks, or damage. Remove the ceramic plunger and inspect for cracks or abrasions to the surface. Located behind the plunger is a keyhole washer and barrier slinger. Both of these parts serve as barriers to keep water from entering the crankcase. To reassemble, begin with installing the barrier slinger with the dish side facing away from the crankcase. Next, install the keyhole washer. The slot can face in any direction. Before installing the plunger retainer, you must first replace the O-ring supplied in the seal kit. Using a pick, remove the backup ring, followed by the O-ring. Install your new O-ring, followed by the backup ring. Ensure that the O-ring is closest to the hex side of the retainer. Before installing into the plunger, lubricate the O-ring and backup ring on the plunger retainer. Install the plunger retainer assembly into the ceramic plunger. This can only be installed in one direction. Before installing the plunger assembly, apply liquid thread sealant to the threads of the plunger rod. Hand thread the plunger assembly into the plunger rod. Use a 21mm hex wrench and torque to specification. If you are replacing the wick, install the new wick into the rear retainer with the long tail of the wick facing down, followed by the retainer. Install the retainer assembly with long tail of the wick facing down. Ensure the long tail of the wick is positioned into the oil pan. Before reinstalling the inlet manifold, rotate the crankshaft until the two outside plungers are at their furthest equal distance. Next, lubricate the surface of the ceramic plungers. Install the inlet manifold over the ceramic plungers. Use a rubber hammer to ensure that the manifold is flush to the crankcase. Next, apply liquid thread sealant to each of the inlet manifold bolts. Use a 12mm Allen wrench and torque to specification. Before reinstalling the male adapters, inspect for wear or damage. Install the male adapter with the flat surface facing out. Before reinstalling, inspect the coil spring for wear or damage. Install the large coil spring over the ceramic plunger and push into place. Install the 3 inlet manifold O-rings into the grooves on the inlet manifold. Before installing the V-packing spacers, be sure to replace the O-rings and backup rings included in the seal kit. Use a pick and remove the O-ring and backup ring located on both ends of the V-packing spacer. Install the new backup ring, followed by the O-ring. The O-ring should be installed towards the outer surface on each side. When installing the V-packing spacer, the side with the machine groove for removal should be facing down into the discharge manifold. Before reinstalling, apply liquid gasket to the O-rings and backup rings on the V-packing spacer. Press into place. Last, install the discharge manifold. While supporting the manifold, hand thread in the hex socket head bolts. Using a 10mm Allen wrench, tighten using proper sequence and torque to specification.